Howdy. This is the Views from the Shop podcast. I'm your host, your one and only host, Tim Miller. And today it is Thursday, October 10th, 2024. And I wish you a very, very, very happy International Stage Management Day. Today's show is, as always, presented exclusively by CBB Analytics. You can go to cbbanalytics.com to get hooked up with stats, analytics, searches, and a whole bunch more that a bunch of Division I men's and women's college basketball programs have access to. Get access to exactly what those coaches have as well. Go to cbbanalytics.com. Today's show, we are continuing through the season preview series, and this is where things get real. This is where you start to feel like the season is just around the corner because, well, number one, it is. Number two, we found out just yesterday what time Ohio State is going to play on November 4th against Texas. And number three, we're getting into the roster. How has the roster changed from last season's team, along with additions, departures, and coaching staff changes as well. In case you missed it, I made sure to post it for you on Twitter or X, however you may enjoy to call it. I posted yesterday, Ohio State will tip off with Texas on November 4th, Monday night at 10 p.m. Eastern. That's 7 o'clock local time out in Vegas, 10 p.m. Eastern. Ohio State will take on Texas to tip off the season. Me personally, not a fan of it. Also not a fan of Ohio State playing a marquee matchup against Texas in Las Vegas. Because if there's anything we know about college basketball or college athletics in general, apparently it's that there's a huge population of Ohio State and Texas fans living in the Las Vegas metropolitan area. No. But hey, if it brings in a few extra dollars, then I guess we'll have to be thankful for it. Don't like that. Don't like the 10 p.m. tip-off either. Nothing we can do about it. And you know what? If you're like me, you will be up waiting for this game just like me all day. Also, let's add some additional lighting into here. If you're watching on YouTube, apologies for that. Additional lighting now provided thanks to a lamp company that's not sponsored. Could be one day. All right. We got to talk roster churn in this one. This is a loaded show. So before we get into that, please do, as always, if you're watching on YouTube, like the video. Just click the thumbs up as long as it's safe. Please do that. It would help out a lot. Subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast, you're not subscribed yet, you got to be subscribed. Today, we're going to talk about a lot of stories, a lot of context, a lot of color that maybe you haven't heard before. Well, I'm going to guarantee some of the stuff is stuff that you haven't heard before. Initially, these were some things that maybe I came out with, and I shared maybe half stories. Now that we're this far out, I'm going to share some more details on what went down during the transfer portal era of the offseason. So also share some stories on that, especially on some players who have left Ohio State as well. Just make sure you're subscribed. Give the show a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts as well. That helps. And then you can always find us on Twitter, X, on Instagram, on YouTube, on Facebook. And I think that's about it. Maybe there's other places that I'm not even aware of. But let's get into it as we kick off, or not kick off, but continue this season preview series. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down kind of memory lane because you go back to the end of March, early April. You're getting ready for baseball season. You're paying attention to what's going on with Ohio State basketball. Of course, NBA playoffs, I think, are maybe ramping up at that point. So maybe you missed some stuff, but it's not even halfway nostalgic. It's like maybe a quarter nostalgic, but it's nice to go back and think about where were we during this time and how far have we come. So that's what we're going to do. I'll try to do this in chronological order, but it won't be perfect. However, how this started was 3 players gone from Ohio State immediately because they have no more eligibility. Dale Bonner gone. Jamison Battle playing professionally now. He was drafted by the Toronto Raptors. I'm not sure if he's still with Toronto at this point. We hope. And Owen Spencer, we wish them happy trails. Thanks for coming and your time at Ohio State. So the Buckeyes have a few to replace already, and immediately they burst onto the scene. And the first transfer, you might not have guessed this, it was Bowen Hardman being the first to enter the transfer portal out of Ohio State. It was one of the quieter moves of the offseason. He ends up at Akron, so we playing in the MAC this year, enjoying some action. Played in 18 games last season, but he did score 11 points against Nebraska. Chris Holtmann at that time of the season was searching for literally anything, and I mean anything that could be a solution, a spark for the team. And by the way, a little known stat, with the loss of Bowen Hardman, Jamison Battle, and Scotty Middleton, who we'll get to in a second, that's literally 50% of your 3-point production from last season that is gone. One half of your 3-point production is gone. We know that head coach Jake Diebler is going to push his team to run. He's also going to push his team to shoot a lot of 3-pointers this year. Be ready for that in the upcoming season. It's going to be high paced. It's going to be a lot of shots from deep. Even players like Austin Parks getting those 3-pointers up in practice. That's going to be something to keep an eye on. We won't go into that in today's show. But Bowen Hardman, the first to leave. And then we hit April, and Scotty Middleton is the next to hit the portal. Now, remember, Scotty Middleton suspended for a game during the regular season. He misses the entire NIT tournament, and there was really no real answers on what happened with Scotty Middleton there in the NIT tournament. Just told it's a family situation. Then, while he's apparently as elusive as a conference road win under Chris Holtmann at Ohio State, he bolts nearly as soon as he could. Again, I'm not going to speak on behalf of anyone else other than myself. It was an interesting ending, to say the least, for Scotty Middleton and his services at Ohio State. He goes to Seton Hall, which technically is closer to home for him. He's got some family in New Jersey, but he's gone. And remember that stint where he entered the NBA draft with the ability to retain his eligibility and return to college. That was just a chance for him to work out and to get some feedback from NBA scouts, knowing he wasn't going to the NBA in that year. That was odd. That was questionable, but he's at Seton Hall, and you can't question that. Now, Scotty Middleton gone. Bringing in Ohio State's first transfer, Jake Diebler, goes out and he gets a former Buckeye, and he gets Meechie Johnson. That came on April 2nd. Now, there was a lot of noise about Meechie Johnson potentially returning to Ohio State in the days prior to him finally committing to the Buckeyes. And remember, we were questioning, not me, some were questioning, did the Meechie Johnson addition for Ohio State force Roddy Gale into the portal? More on that to come. Meechie Johnson, 14 points per game last season, 3 assists per game, 4 rebounds per game. He shot 40% from the field, 32% from behind the 3-point line, and 79% from the free throw line. Right now, he's definitely in line, looking at a starting spot with Bruce Thornton there as 2 point guard type players, 2 players who can play on the ball. They practice a lot this summer, creating for one another and playing off the ball. But Meechie Johnson was the first really big time portal hit for Jake Diebler, and it was big time. Meechie Johnson is going to play a lot of minutes for Ohio State in this upcoming season. It's very, very good for the Buckeyes that they can return Meechie Johnson back home to Columbus. Now, there's one player whose home is no longer in Columbus, and he's gone north, and that's Roddy Gale. So, Meechie Johnson commits on April 2nd, and on April 3rd, the very next day, Roddy Gale Jr. decides that he is going to enter the transfer portal. Now, this came as a bit of a shock. Remember, in the postseason, Gale said multiple times how much he wanted to stay with his family, how he wanted to keep playing with this team, this core, this brotherhood that had been developed. I 100% believe that that's true. Here's the deal. This had nothing to do with money, him deciding to go into the transfer portal, and he, as far as I can tell, wasn't necessarily lured out of the portal. And I was also told it had nothing to do with money in the fact that Ohio State had enough. Had Ohio State wanted to keep Roddy Gale Jr. based on money alone, then they would have. The issue with Roddy Gale Jr., he wanted the ball more. Now, is that such a bad thing? Well, I would say it's probably not the greatest thing based on 2-year sample size of seeing Roddy Gale Jr. struggle with turnovers, struggle with decision making, struggle with simply ball handling in the half court and things like that. He wanted the ball more. He wanted to squeeze the orange. That's all good. Ballers are going to ball. Roddy Gale Jr. just wanted the ball. Can't be mad at him for that. Is that such a bad thing? No. However, on the flip side of this, him landing at Michigan, on the other hand, that's a bad thing for sure. Now, Roddy Gale Jr. heads to Michigan. The role is going to be there for him to get a lot of playing time, to be more of a focal point of the offense. He's not going to play second fiddle to a guy like Bruce Thornton. That's why he ends up at Michigan. I was told he took less money to go to Michigan than to stay at Ohio State. I don't know how true that is necessarily, but you notice head coach Jake Diebler, when he was introduced as the head coach of the Ohio State Ohio State University men's basketball team, he had a huge, huge emphasis on recruiting the state of Ohio and building this program up with Ohio kids. You look at the run that this team had, the program had from 2005, 2006 up to the mid to early 2010s. A lot of those teams built with Ohio talent. Roddy Gale Jr., hailing from New York, maybe not necessarily understanding the rivalry of Ohio State and Michigan, also not understanding the pride of wearing that block O, the scarlet and gray. A guy like Colin White, he gets that. Austin Parks, he gets that. Guys who grew up in the state of Ohio, they get that. If you're not from the state, can you necessarily blame him? Probably not. But he was told, or he said in an interview, I was always told to hate Michigan, but I wasn't sure why. If you need to be told why, probably a lot of underlying issues there as well. So you see the emphasis there from Diebler on wanting Ohio kids. This was crazy. This day when he entered the portal, I remember going live at work on Twitter/X and starting a space at like noon. And I said, all right, let's talk about it. And I was very well informed on this situation before it was announced, once it was announced, and further on through this entire situation on what was going on. So I was able to share some context, some thoughts. Some people saying, well, this is all on Jake Diebler. Others saying Ohio State doesn't want to pony up the money. This program is poverty, yada, yada, yada. Not necessarily true. I don't know how true this is. I don't really think that Jake Diebler necessarily wanted Roddy Gale back in the program based on his desires to have the ball more. And I know for a fact it did not come down to NIL money. But Roddy Gale Jr. heads out from Michigan. Again, this is something where whether you've been living under a rock and you have no idea what's been going on with Ohio State basketball over the past 6 months, or you have been paying attention, as close attention to me, to Ohio State basketball, and you eat this content up, some of the stuff's going to be new. Some of the stuff should be engaging, interesting, and all those types of things. So Roddy Gale Jr., he bolts, he hits the transfer portal, and then now the sky is falling because Zed Key entered the transfer portal on April 5th. However, this felt like one of those scenarios where it was just kind of like you shake hands and part ways as friends. Zed Key spent 4 really, really solid years at Ohio State. He was an exceptional offensive rebounder, really, really good finishing in the paint and at the block, especially for being undersized in terms of height compared to other centers and power forwards, whatever you would call him, in the Big Ten. He played 4 good years of Big Ten basketball for the Ohio State Buckeyes. Everyone kind of knew that this was the end for him. I spoke with him before anything was announced, and it was pretty clear, I think, at that point. And then he decides to hit the portal. You wish him the best of luck at Dayton. Things are good. Zed Key, I don't think, has any ill will toward Ohio State. He was actually going to join the show as a part of the summer guest series. Weren't able to nail anything down in regards to schedules and had others that we had to fit in, and that's okay. But I don't think you're joining the show if you hate Ohio State basketball. So that was all good. You shake hands and part ways, but Zed Key will no longer be a part of the team. And then we pump the brakes a little bit here and we look away from the transfer portal. I remember I was driving to the airport and I get a notification on my phone. I check, and Marcus Johnson is going to commit to Ohio State. Marcus Johnson, a class of 2026 point guard, top 24, 25 player at the time at least. He's going to commit to Ohio State. 6'1, 175. He's a point guard from Garfield Heights, so that Cleveland area. And again, Jake Diebler talked about how keeping in-state talent in state was something that he was going to emphasize. We already knew that the Johnson family, Michi Johnson, Marcus Johnson, the entire family really likes Jake Diebler. And I mean, there are family members literally tweeting about how excited they were about Jake Diebler before he was even named head coach. And when he was named head coach, that pretty much sealed the deal for Marcus Johnson to commit to Ohio State. This is likely going to be a top 5 all-time commitment in school history. Now, Jake Diebler is doing a lot of good work in the high school recruiting ranks right now. He's doing a lot of work, and he is in play for a couple really good players who have announced decision dates soon. Nico Bundalo, another player they are in on. I hear, by the way, better things than I would expect. Ohio State really feels like it has a good shot for Nico Bundalo. I'm still skeptical. I'll be surprised if he does commit to Ohio State, but every time I talk to someone, they are happy with where they stand with Nico Bundalo. All that to say, Marcus Johnson probably going to be a top 5 player in Ohio State history in terms of coming out of high school. Right now, his grade is just below Greg Oden, BJ Mullins, Jared Sullinger, and William Buford. And that's it. If you're looking at 247 Sports, he's more highly rated than players like Daquan Cook, D'Angelo Russell, Deshaun Thomas, DJ Carton, Malachi Branham, Keita Bates-Diop, Tayson Chapman, Mike Conley, Junie Mobley. Those are some players on the team ranked very high. Marcus Johnson has better ratings than all of those guys. So picking up that commitment, that felt like a very serious shift in momentum for the program. You're picking up another 4 or 5-star player. We'll see where he ends up when the final rankings come out for his class, but he's got a chance to be a 5-star player. So getting Marcus Johnson was huge. And then a few days later, Ohio State picks up Aaron Bradshaw. There were rumors. Aaron Bradshaw, he visited Ohio State. It goes well. And then he commits to Ohio State. And this is where probably the most drama of the offseason unfolds. But let's talk about Aaron Bradshaw first. So he commits, he leaves Kentucky. He's going to join Ohio State. Former 5-star player. He's a very popular breakout candidate from the media outside of Ohio State right now, from what I've seen. Again, former 5-star recruit. Last season at Kentucky, played 14 minutes per game. His playing time really waned down the stretch under John Calipari. He averaged just under 5 points per game, 3 rebounds per game, just under a block per game, 58% from the field, 29% from the three-point line. Not a great free throw shooter. Some good, some not so good in those numbers, but the stats per 40 minutes show some promise. And additionally, the promise is in the fit with Aaron Bradshaw. Aaron Bradshaw, the way that he plays is specifically designed to thrive in a Jake Diebler type of playing style, both offensively and defensively. He's going to be able to run. He's going to be able to step behind the three-point line and shoot the three. The spacing is going to be far better, maybe, than we've ever seen for Ohio State basketball. They're going to run up and down the floor, and this is the perfect fit for Aaron Bradshaw. Is Aaron Bradshaw playing with Jake Diebler at Ohio State? So the Buckeyes land Aaron Bradshaw. That's a big deal. That's a huge deal for Ohio State. It was also a huge deal for Felix Okpara because a few days after Aaron Bradshaw announces his commitment to Ohio State, Felix Okpara says he's going to enter the transfer portal. Now, I believe that he announced on a Sunday morning. A few beat writers were prepped with the news on Saturday night. Ohio State already knew, Jake Diebler already knew, and these beat writers being prepped essentially to spin the story in the right way. Here's what actually happened. So, Felix Okpara said it had nothing to do with Aaron Bradshaw. That is not correct. That is wrong. You can say that, and that's fine. It's not right. He said he wanted to do what was best for him, and he essentially blamed the 2 years under Chris Holtmann being unsatisfactory. That was the reason why he was leaving Ohio State after 2 years. However, the only good that he got out of his 2 years was a tiny sliver under Jake Diebler. And during that tiny sliver, they win a lot of games. Felix Okpara plays a lot. He gets the playing time, and the Buckeyes have success overall. Now, that exact man responsible for the only good times really that Felix Okpara had in Ohio State jersey, now named the head man at Ohio State. And yet he still says, I'd like to enter the portal. If there were a story that alluded to maybe the possibility potentially of Aaron Bradshaw committing to Ohio State, and then based on that knowledge, another program reaching out to Felix Okpara's side to see if he might be open to putting a foot out the door for a certain price that is put in his lap, the rest being history. If that were a possibility, I certainly would not say it on this show. Or would I? It's hard to say. All that to say, there was some funny business with Felix Okpara entering the portal, and it's my I'll say assumption to keep it a little more up in the air. It's my assumption that Felix Okpara didn't want to compete with Aaron Bradshaw for a starting spot. So Felix Okpara, he transfers out. He heads to Tennessee. And those are the 5 transfers that we had out from Ohio State. Started with Bowen Hardman. Then you get Scotty Middleton. Then you have Roddy Gale. Everything is on fire. Then Zed Key. Our entire world is burning down. Felix Okpara out. And then actually, a day before Felix Okpara enters the transfer portal, Micah Parrish, kind of out of nowhere, commits to Ohio State. So he's in the transfer portal, played for San Diego State, played at Oakland before that. By the way, no one talks about this. He played with Jaden Ledee, which we sweep under the rug, the fact that he was at Ohio State for 1 season, and then he goes to mess around at San Diego State, and he's an All-American. How does this happen? For so many reasons, you have to ask how and why that happened. Regardless, Micah Parrish apparently didn't hear that bad of news from Jaden Ledee, and he heads to Ohio State. This one kind of came out of the blue. He's in play to start. He's very much in play to start, kind of at that 3, but not the traditional 3, the small forward type. It's more of a stretch 3, if you want to call that. It's going to be a 3-guard starting lineup for Jake Diebler, as far as I'm aware at this point. He averaged 10 points per game at San Diego State last season, 4 rebounds per game, 12.9 assist rate. That's great. And 1 steal per game. Not much of a shooter, but he does bring serious experience. He brings a couple of deep NCAA tournament runs, and he profiles to be, to me, a Dale Bonner type. Play defense, share the ball, and be maybe not necessarily the glue guy, but come in and do what you're asked to do and fill the holes, fill the voids that are needed. So that's a nice pickup for Ohio State. Keep an eye on Micah Parrish as the season goes along. Not a player that a lot of people are talking about. Uncle Micah, I guess you could call him. He is he may be older than you and I, but he brings good experience to Ohio State, and we'll see how he meshes with the Buckeyes. And then Ohio State picks up a couple more additions, one being Sean Stewart. Had to wait all the way until May for Ohio State to get Sean Stewart, but Ohio State was a finalist for him in high school. His camp said that part, the relationship that was nurtured there by Jake Diebler, that had a lot to do with the decision to kind of re-up conversations with Ohio State. Sean Stewart now becomes the second former 5-star Diebler landed, and the second player who was highly touted out of high school, freshman year, playing for a blue blood. When you're a freshman, when you're a 5-star, you're playing for a blue blood like Kansas or Duke in Sean Stewart's scenario, Aaron Bradshaw, Kentucky, those types of schools, you're not going to get the most playing time at times because every single player on that team might as well be a 5-star. Sean Stewart didn't get a lot of playing time. He wanted more playing time. He wanted a better fit. Sean Stewart, he's going to have the ability to run up and down the floor and leap and do all the things that he wants to do at Ohio State. And then we have a bit of a dead period. By the way, before we get to these final two editions, some names that didn't happen. Do you remember the name Matt Alaco? I believe he was out of Princeton. Buckeyes were really close to landing him. He ends up going to Notre Dame. Honestly, I'm not sure that there's a player who Ohio State picked up who's worse than Matt Alaco. I think Ohio State lucked out kind of in that scenario. Trey Townsend. The war with Arizona and Michigan State for Trey Townsend. Buckeyes felt like they were in a really good spot for Townsend's services. He decides to go to Arizona. We're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for an answer. He goes to Arizona. Very, very much sad boy hours for Ohio State fans. At that point, Tucker Anderson out of Central Arkansas. Love this guy. I love this player. I think Tucker Anderson is going to be a really, really good college basketball player. He's going to be fun to watch. Buckeyes don't get him. I don't even remember where he landed. Didn't go to Ohio State. But those are some names that walk down memory lane. Got to bring up. All right. Let's talk Quez Glover. Quez Glover, this was one that was kind of wrapped up, and I guess it would be similar to a situation where you have let me tell you an example. So in maybe 8th grade, I wanted an Xbox for Christmas. There's this huge box underneath the tree. And what I wanted was I wanted the Xbox, I wanted the Guitar Hero combo with not just the guitar. I wanted the drums, the guitar. I think that's all it really came with. All that to say, it was going to be a big box. That big box underneath the Christmas tree for like 2 weeks. I knew exactly what it was. I just couldn't open it until December 25th. Kind of similar here. All right. Quez Glover, a guy, Ohio State, they knew what they were getting. They knew who they were getting. They knew he was going to commit. It was just a matter of time. And then it happens. Quez Glover from Florida to Samford to Kansas State to Ohio State. If that's not the beauty of college basketball, I don't know what is. Wrong. I hate it. That's fine. What does Quez Glover bring to Ohio State, though? He brings speed and shooting. I've heard really, really good things out of practice from in regards to Quez Glover. I think he's going to get a fair amount of run for Ohio State this year. The only question is, can he stay healthy? He's dealt with injuries at Florida, at Samford, and at Kansas State. He missed all of last season with a knee injury at Kansas State. He missed, I believe, an entire season at Samford as well, and missed some time with Florida too. Can those knees hold up? We will hope so. And then the final addition for Ohio State, a player I can guarantee you, this is why you subscribe to the show. No one taught you how to pronounce this young man's name other than me. There's another podcast out there saying his name and saying it correctly. It was just me. I had to do some research. I had to do some back channelings, maybe some shady stuff, even with some transferring of resources with maybe the entire country of Croatia. Who knows? In order to figure this out, it's Ivan Nigovan, okay? Ivan Nigovan, 7'1" stretch center from the country of Croatia, 19 years old. He's going to come in as a freshman. He's a freshman. He's not a transfer. Kind of was in the transfer type of time frame. But this is going to be a fun player. Number one, he's wearing number 17, which I just feel like it fits him really, really well. So I'm good with that. I don't want 55. You're not Vlad Golden at Michigan or FAU. I think you were like 50 or 51 or something like that. That's not who you are. You're a 7'1" stretch center. You can block shots. You can hit threes. You're going to be a fun player to watch. Let's get you a unique, exotic number like 17. We approve of that here on the Views from the Shop podcast. I don't think he's going to get much run this year. I could be wrong. I don't think he's going to get much playing time for Ohio State this year. I think he's going to need some time to develop, and we'll see what happens. But still, a great pickup and a great fit at Ohio State. And then 2 freshmen, and then we move on. Junie Mobley, composite top 50 player. He can shoot the freaking lights out of the ball. He's going to have playing time this year with Tayson Chapman out with an ACL injury, something we didn't even talk about on the show. We also didn't talk about Dorian Jones committing to Ohio State. He's going to be on campus next year. That's exciting. Of course, a lot happened in this offseason. This is why you can't sleep on the Views from the Shop podcast, because we covered everything that we're talking about today. Covered all of it. Junie Mobley at Ohio State, you can shoot the lights out. He's here with the Buckeyes right now. Colin White, a top 125 player. overall. Ohio Mr. Basketball last year, back-to-back state championship appearances for Colin White. He's a winner. He's an Ohio kid. He understands the scarlet and gray. He grew up rooting for Ohio State. And Ohio State also got the commitment of Alex Smith in the 2026 class as well, another Ohio kid in Upper Arlington. That's a big time move as well. So a lot happened here in the offseason in terms of additions. It was busy. It was big. It was great. It was buzzing. It was bussing. Pause. So a lot of good things happening, a lot of good additions. We got one other thing to talk about here, and that is the additions in the coaching staff, because Jake Diebler is named head coach, and we got a lot going on with coaching staff moves as well. But before we get to that, got to talk to you about CBB Analytics. CBB Analytics is the reason this show is coming to you today. So you should at the least, check out their website, cbbanalytics.com. I use this website to build stats and profile and searches and all these different types of things so that my content can be as good as possible for you, the Ohio State basketball fan, because they have the best content out there. You can run searches and queries all you want, team-based stats, player-based stats, on-off profiles. You can compare players to other players and see, hey, this player comes into Ohio State. Who is he the most similar to in terms of players for Ohio State last year or players across the Big Ten? Doesn't matter. There's a whole lot of good stuff going on at cbbanalytics.com. Just go there. If you're bored, if you're doom scrolling, remind yourself, pinch yourself, say snap out of it, go to cbbanalytics.com, check it out. You will not regret it. And we thank them for being the exclusive presenting sponsor of today's show and the Views from the Shop podcast for the 2024-25 college basketball season. All righty. Let's get moving here. All right. Coaching changes. A lot of them. Jake Diebler had to do a lot of moves. Let's start with Jamal Walker. This is not in any sort of order, but alas, we carry on. So Jamal Walker, hired as an assistant coach. He spent his last 4 years at Grand Canyon, just upset St. Mary's in this year's NCAA tournament. Before that, he had 8 seasons at Illinois, and he also coached at Ohio University. He's got the familiarity, not only with the Big Ten, but with the state of Ohio in general and the Big Ten region, Big Ten country. I think that's huge. And you're going to start to see a trend with this as well. He played college basketball. Joel Justice, no particular order. He's hired as associate head coach at Ohio State. This is my favorite move of the offseason. Ohio State picked up a lot of players. They got some big-time commitments in the high school ranks as well. Ohio State hiring Joel Justice is the best move, in my opinion, that Jake Diebler did. So he's hired as the associate head coach. He comes from NC State. NC State, you recall, just made a run to the Final Four, and stats and analytics confirming the Final Four means you're one of the 4 best teams in college basketball in a particular season. So Joel Justice, a part of a team that was top 4 in college basketball. He was at Kentucky. He was at Arizona State. He won wherever he went, and he's got the recruiting pedigree. He recruited Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Bam Adebayo, Emmanuel Quickley, among others. Super intelligent. He's got an analytics background. He was a part of the Kentucky team that went 37 or 38-0. Big-time pickup for Ohio State. And just hope that you can get him here in Columbus for a few years. Not a couple years, a few years, and you'll be happy. So Joel Justice joins the staff as well. Dave Dickerson returns to Columbus. He was with Ohio State with Thad Matta from 2010 to 2017. Gone from 2017 to 2024. Not positive what else happened during that time frame at Ohio State basketball, but we move on. One thing that we know Jake Diebler could use on this staff is experience. That is what Dave Dickerson has. So he has coached for over 20 years. He had stops at Gardner-Webb, at James Madison, at Radford, at Maryland, at Tulane, at Ohio State, of course, and at USC upstate. He's won a lot of games in different stints. He has head coaching experience, and he played college basketball as well back in the day, I believe, with Maryland. And then Ohio State also picked up Taylor Battle as a player at Penn State. Over 2,000 career points, all-time leading scorer in Penn State program history. Led the team in scoring in all 4 seasons. That's insane to do that in all 4 seasons. Coming as a freshman, that's crazy enough. To do it 3 seasons after that too, that's big time. He finished fourth all-time assists, third in three-pointers made, second in field goals made, fourth in free throws made, and Penn State history holds the Big Ten record for most starts and minutes played. He led Penn State to its first ever NIT title. If it's Penn State winning an NIT title, that's the same as Ohio State winning a national title, in my eyes. He played overseas for a while, played for the Scarlet and Gray and TBT. Really, really strong staff that he's helping with. And of course, at Northwestern, he helped with Boo Buie. He helped with Chase Audige. He played for Ohio State. He coached there, and he's heading into year 5 of coaching. A lot of experience. He's got a lot of recruiting prowess, I would say. He's one of 3 primary recruiters on the team. Big time pickup for Ohio State. And the last one is Luke Simmons. So Luke Simmons, he had 2 years running operations at Baylor. He worked with Jake Diebler at Vandy for 3 seasons. He also worked with Jake Diebler at Valparaiso. And I think Diebler appreciates the Scott Drew approach to college basketball, to coaching, to life, whatever you want to call it. And that's part of why he brought Simmons on as well. I wouldn't say it's part of why he brought him in. It's more so a nice bonus to bringing him in. So this coaching staff that Ohio State has amassed, a lot of these names you're not going to be familiar with necessarily, but they are big time hires in my eyes. I think this is the best coaching staff that Ohio State could have dreamed of. With Jake Diebler being named head coach, he got a lot of big names. He got a lot of names who have done a lot of things in their playing days in college basketball, in their coaching days in college basketball, having connections to the Big Ten, having connections to the state of Ohio. All of that stuff is great. You pair that with a really, really, really impressive transfer portal class. If this team can mesh, if this team can fit into Jake Diebler's style, this team could be very, very good in this upcoming season. I'm not going to put any numbers out. I'm not going to say any predictions right now because, well, that's for later on in the month as we continue on with the season preview series. So that's that. If you're wondering how has this team changed, if you've got a friend who's an Ohio State basketball fan, like they're not top percentile like you, but they like Ohio State basketball, I would suggest they listen to the show. Just show them it. Tell them to listen. 40 minutes, you're in and you're out. You know exactly what happened during the offseason, and you're ready for Ohio State to go play Texas for the most part until the next episode, which will come out next week. We're going to go 2 per week. We're going to keep pumping out the episodes, pumping out the content. If you want to see anything specifically covered, if you've got questions, always hit up the DMs at the Shop Pod, and I will do my best to cover those questions. Got big recruiting decisions coming up as well. We'll keep an eye on that, and we'll keep an eye on everything else Ohio State basketball related, because that's what this show is all about. Alrighty. This was a breeze. This was a well-paced show today, and I think we covered everything that we needed to, and for that we can be thankful and grateful. We can also be thankful and grateful that the Ohio State basketball season is mere weeks away. I am going to shut up before you shut me off. Appreciate you listening to today's show, and go Bucks.